Good morning YouTube and welcome back to the channel and Project Hoonigrom, where as you can see we loosely have an EXC300 sort of positioned in there. So obviously in the last episode I've just rested it on the stand. It needs to go back a good 8+ inches for the exhaust, just for it to fit in the bike, for everything to work. So today's video we're going to start chopping the frame up. I've got some ideas to show you of how we're going to make the engine fit, what brackets we're going to use. But initial impressions, things are looking pretty good. So grab yourself a brew and let's get into it. So as mentioned in the intro, we've got to do some work today, and that is going to be removing this, which held the original ignition point on there. And what I'm going to do is just run a 4-inch grinder across there, take that off. It's the same on the other side, and then that plate should just drop off, and that'll allow us to slide the whole engine back, start working out what we're going to need to be doing down here bracket wise for it to mount onto the actual KTM engine. And the other thing that I'm going really happy with, which is going to probably be quite useful, is this original mount came off the KTM and it was secured to the cylinder head and it went to the frame of the bike. So I'm going to try, something like that could work pretty well. Obviously it's going to be further back down, but this could provide a good solution just for mocking up to lock it in place and then fabricate the rear bracket and then the frame that's going to run down the bottom. But pretty exciting stuff. The biggest issue we've got now is we've just got parts absolutely everywhere. So today's first mission is to try and get all of this washed up and get it listed on eBay so I can actually walk around the bike and get the project underway. Housekeeping is crucial for a clean and successful project, in my opinion. Something else obviously I need to do today in this video is remove all the standard throttle body, all the wiring loom, the ABS pump, all the ABS lines, and then it will be a bare bike. And at this point, like we mentioned, no going back. So the mounts have been chopped down. Incredibly ghetto. The long-term plan will be to cut across the weld line, sand wheel it back, and then repowder coat the frame. Obviously, this is just the trial phase to see if it works. But, obviously when the forks compress, there's a good chance that's going to contact there. So that's where the custom exhaust is really going to come into its own. But this side, I'm really happy with. What's these little brackets? Once they go there, the engine basically sits flush with this side of the frame. That will give us a top support. Obviously we've got to fabricate a cage coming down, but The biggest issue at the moment is not sprocket alignment, as you can, that focuses, hopefully see, pretty much there on the alignment for the sprocket. The sprocket height is pretty good, maybe needs to come up. Yeah, it probably will need to come tilt back. The biggest issue at the moment is the carburetor. I mean, that is not going to work. I could bring maybe a sharp radius round. I don't know, I'm not too sure how that's going to affect the running of it. Obviously, I'm not looking for absolutely every pound of horsepower out of it, but that is not going to work like that with a standard frame. So my concern at the moment is I may still have to chop the back and tubular frame around it. But yeah, that's a wrap for tonight. Definitely cool to see it in there. And then obviously the next big challenge is where the radiators are going to go for the cooling. I mean, not a lot of room there, is there? Not a lot of room at all. With the chain guard removed, we now have obviously all this space here, and as you can see, one tiny little sprocket on the back there, which I think with the gear in, I'm going to have to keep it to a similar size, but obviously on a different pitch to match the 520 that I believe I've got on the KTM. So the reason for this test is to check that the chain is not going to foul on the swing arm. So using a steel rule, if I rest it on the top of the rear one there and the front, obviously this is still a little bit high, but you can see we're on the top. So right now, in theory, that would foul, but what you've got to remember is when you sit on the bike, the weight goes down, the swing arm pivot point will change. That, where it is now, is near identical to the original Grom one. So I'm confident that is going to work. My issue is this bloody carb. I mean, let's grab that off the bench. Let's look, doing this one-handed with all the throttle assembly. So one carburetor boost, but as you can see, ain't going to go in there. So do I modify the frame? Or do we put a bend on it and bring the carb out? I mean, it's going to be pretty close to your foot, that's for sure. It's going to limit us on filter options, if filter at all. But this is all part of the journey, I guess, of custom bike building that I've embarked on. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, obviously let me know in the comment section. But I think two options is, one, cut into the frame and then reinforce the frame there and have the carb around it. Or we bring a bend off of it and have the carb sat there, but it's all getting pretty close to that rear foot peg, rear set even. These exhausts on though, that's pretty cool, even though it needs to be customised and brought back, but we have got space to do that. At the moment, the engine is just held on the stand here. You can see all the handle getting in the way. So the first job, you probably just about see it there, I'm going to mark a pen where I need to roughly put this bracket. It's going to drop it a little bit lower so we haven't got that contact there. But that does mean once this end is bolted up, it shouldn't just wiggle about. I can then start mocking up the bracket for down here, which I've already sort of thought about in my head how it's going to be done. And as mentioned, we're okay just on sprocket height when the bike is going to be on the ground and a rider's on it. But obviously I can go up a size on this, we can go up a size on the rear sprocket. It's really going to be trial and error with the gearing, but I think provisionally we're going to have to build a mount for in here and the other side. But it's looking, other than this carb, I'm positive. It's just the carb. The carb is the unknown at the moment. But yeah, let's get this drilled and then we can start having a play with how it's going to sit. Okay, so we have a ratchet strap compressing the bike down on the ramp. And as you can see on my steel rule, that's roughly where the chain's going to sit inside the sprocket. And then on the back. So I think, engine height wise, this is acceptable. Anyone in the comments knows otherwise, please let me know, because it'd be a great help. But this is my understanding. I'm not an engineer, but providing you've got enough clearance for the chain to run, you're not going to foul it. So to me, this looks doable. Obviously with the mount in the front, zip tie through the back. I mean, the front one in itself is holding the motor solid now. That's completely on its own there. But with this height, we now have a bit more room for the carb. So it's certainly appealing to go at this height now. And I've also been brainstorming while sat here. Originally, I was going to fabricate some sort of tube cradle, but I'm wondering if I should just, same as these, use some laser cut plates that just pick up these mounting points, run up here, and then can be either bolted or welded so they can be removed for taking the engine out. And we have something to mount a radiator on the front there as well. More head scratching. So the next step is going to be having a quick look at fabricating this mount. So as we mentioned, we've got a point down here and I want to run something up here and then back to the frame. So for those that have watched the videos in the past, cardboard first, but I don't think this is going to be big enough. But we'll have a quick look and see if we can just start mocking something up, get a rough idea of what it's going to look like. And then once we've got that mount done, we can then work on the rear one. Another thing I want to have a quick look at in today's video is cooling. So we are running a twin setup as standard on the EXC, which is just not going to fit, unfortunately. It doesn't even come close because of the space coming down here. The twin rads, it's too big. What you got to remember is, and again, I could be quickly corrected, but this bike is designed to run off-road, steep gradients, not a lot of airflow. You're not going to be sitting on motorways, A roads, B roads for cooling. So I would say it's overcooled because it does a lot of hard work at low speeds, whereas this bike is probably going to be realistically doing anywhere from 20 to 70 mile an hour. So it's going to be good airflow. And we've got a little bit of space here. So this trim sits basically on top of the fuel tank, about there roughly. So that is our cavity in there. And I'm going to do some quick measurements now with you guys. We're going to have a look and see if the CBR 250 radiator is going to work. Now I've seen people who have changed the engines on the Groms to the CBR 250 and use that radiator and it fits fine in there. So I'm pretty confident this is going to work. The question will be, can we keep the engine at 75 to 85 degrees Celsius when running, which is the operating window for the EXC 2-stroke. But it's all going to be trial and error, and like I say, because the bike's going to be moving, it should have good airflow through it. We don't get really hot weather in the UK, and when it is ridiculously hot, I don't go out riding anywhere. It's uncomfortable in full leather. So I'm going to get a tape measure now, or the steel rule, and have a quick look and see what space we've got there and see what the radiator size is for the CBR. So if Google serves me well, 32 centimeters is the width of the radiator for the CBR, which, that is going to be tight, really tight in there. But I think for the sake of, I mean, there seem to be companies that are producing them. It looks like a Chinese brand that are producing a direct replica for £70. It might be worth just getting one of those just to trial it rather than going genuine Honda, because if it doesn't fit, I don't really want to mess around with a £200-300 even radiator. So yeah, I'm confident it's going to sit in there. And then we've got good feed from the top and then obviously the return down the bottom. This is the first look at Stone Automotive CAD cardboard amateur design. As you can see, it would mount to the lower point down there, and then we'd have it braced up at the top, and the radiator would sit here or here, however we design that forward. I think that's going to need to come round more to pick up that bolt hole. But that's my initial impressions. We've got room for the exhaust still, because the exhaust is going to start working its way around here, so that's not going to interfere. Pretty happy with that for initial look. So let's, I mean, if anyone knows any actual CAD or SolidWorks users that can make that in 5mm sheet steel for me, that would be amazing. But otherwise it might be a bit of homemade creation. I'd like to do it properly, but for the test phase, definitely. Once the cardboard templates are all in good order, I can then move on to making it out of perspex. So I've got a sheet here, it's 5mm thick, let's grab that. So it's a good thickness, it's what the metal's going to be basically, that when we do go to get them made of steel, but it's going to give me a good idea of how it's all going to fit, and it's pretty easy to cut and shape. So obviously we're still finalising the mounts, but as you can see, it's big enough for me to modify this top part here, and well, hopefully it gives you a good idea of where I'm going with this. But yeah, really happy now. We're going to start fabricating some mounts out of the perspex, get them bolted in place, and once I'm happy and know where everything fits, I can then look at either getting them made in steel or trying to cut them out myself. But I think getting them laser cut is going to be the best option for that sort of OEM plus finish. And again, a bit more revision to the cardboard. You can start seeing now that we're getting to an alignment point. So what my plan will be is to run obviously more material around here. This is just the cardboard cutout, it's the biggest sheet I had, but ultimately these plates that are going to be made are going to stick out further, so there's probably going to be spaces off of this that bring it out. So who knows at the moment. Now, it's quite exciting, it's interesting, I think, for me, obviously playing around with the mounts. And I was concerned last night when I was looking at it, I thought, do you know what, is 5mm steel going to be thick enough for this? And then I had a look at another Grom swap where someone had used a CBR, I think it's the 300 or the 250, and the mount they use just uses 2 rear points off the block on steel plates that look like 5mm as well. So this is going to be overly strengthened, and if anything now, the frame will be utilised with the engine being part of the structure, whereas obviously the Grom, the stock engine just sits out in the front, there's no additional bracing, whereas now this all reinforces the frame into the engine. So in my eyes, I mean, again, let me know in the comments if you think otherwise, this is going to be solid, really solid. So this is the first look at what the mount is going to look like now. If you saw in that clip earlier, unfortunately, it sort of snapped at the end as I was drilling on the acrylic, unfortunately. But it does work. I mean, it's still going to give us a good idea, and this is the first time I'm going to be able to properly look at how the gap is. So as you can see there, this will be obviously either steel or maybe even alley. It's looking like we're going to need 25mm spacer this side, and I don't think it's going to need any other spacer on the other side, but we'll switch it over, put it on the other side, and then have a look at that as well. And I will do a brace in the middle, and then the radiator can sit on there as well. But it's sort of coming together now, giving a good idea of how it looks. Like I say, just got to work on the big one on the rear. So as you can see on the left hand side, we're not going to need any spacing because the way the mount is set up is it's slightly over to the right as per what we've done with this spacer. So this, in theory, should be just literally a longer stud or a longer bolt, and it will have its own nuts on the end. And then down here, you can see it's bolted up. So it's looking really good. I've also got a solution, I think and hope, for the carb. So I've got some 45-degree pipe, some clamps, but it'll all make more sense when that arrives. So hopefully that'll be here in the next couple of days. And fingers crossed, if I can get that sorted out, my good friend Andy's going to try and get these templated up on CAD for me so that we can get them laser cut. I've just got to finish that rear mount and we will have an engine in place. That's going to be a wrap for today's video. As you saw, mocked up the acrylic ones. I've got some cardboard ones to send off to my friend Andy to see if he can work magic and get these into a CAD so that we can get them properly laser cut, so they'll be nice. Because I mean, look at my attempt on the acrylic. Imagine what that's going to be like in alley or steel. Not good. So the good news with the acrylic is because it's 5mm thick, it allowed me to take all the measurements that I'm going to need for all the spacers that we're going to get fabricated. So I think we're going to end the video there. If I throw some clips in after this, it's just because the bits have turned up for the carb and I'm desperate just to see if it works. But until next time, thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, hit that like button and do consider subscribing.